and not specifically him, but I stand here only because of the sons of the Indian Army. I can still vividly remember the time back in the valley in December of 1989, when things were going out of control. And my father was posted in Anantnag, which is now known as Islamabad. And I think some cricket match or something had happened, and they had decided to, and it would happen. I mean, we grew up watching an environment where अगर हिंदुस्तान मैच जीतता था तो हमारे घरों में पत्थर पड़ते थे, हारता था तब और ज़्यादा पड़ते थे. तो बड़ा फनी लगता था कि यार अब तो हार गए हैं, अब तो इतने ज़्यादा पत्थर मत मारो. तो वो समझ में आता था बाद में क्यों होता था. So we had this mosque that had come up right next to our house. Was in a very precarious position. We were right next to the session courts, and there was another government property there, and then there was a piece of land which there was a mosque that had come up, and back in those days, they had these cassettes. They would play those cassettes, and those lines have been immortalized by many films now. Kashmir Files was one of them. So I think it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock in the night, and our house came under massive stone pelting, and they started throwing those petrol bombs that they had innovated that time. My mother was unwell. My younger sister, she's about 4 years younger to me. I was 16 or maybe 17 that time. So it was pretty scary, and then my father, he jumped over a few walls and he went to Khanabal military station in Anantnag, and I still remember the name. There was Lieutenant Colonel Pathania there. I think he passed away, and he said, "Yeah, we can't do anything. I mean, this is a civilian situation, and we are still, we just can't do it." But then he was kind enough to rescue us in an ambulance, and that's how we left with the 2 pieces of bags that we ever had, and then began a long, arduous journey of about a year that followed in Jammu. When I started from a refugee camp, I've ideally seen my life change in 24 hours, from a palatial living to a refugee camp, and then to a 10 by something room. The smallest cabin that I ever acquired in my professional life was far bigger than the room that we lived, my family lived. And it was a very difficult situation. Back then we used to think 2 दिन में वापस चले जाएंगे, हफ्ते में वापस चले जाएंगे. वो हफ्ता, महीना सालों में कब गुजर गया पता ही नहीं चला. 32 साल हो गए. I think it is now going to be 33rd year. But all of us, I think, are forever grateful to Indian Army, and thank you, sir. I think nobody can ever do. People like us can just talk. हम लोग सिर्फ बातें कर सकते हैं, और उसमें भी हमको लगता है बहुत बड़ी बहादुरी की बात है. पर मुझे लगता है कई जन्मों का फल अगर एक तरफ रखें, और एक फौजी की एक पल, तो वो एक फौजी होने का जो वो एक पल होता है, मुझे लगता नहीं कि उसकी कभी भी कोई बहादुरी की उसकी कोई मिसाल हो सकती है, या उसका कोई पैरेलल दुनिया में हो सकता है. दुनिया में शायद ही ऐसा कोई कर पाए कि वो सामने अपनी छाती पे गोली खाता है और उसको पता भी नहीं होता कि वो कभी पूछता भी नहीं है कि मैंने ऐसा क्यों किया, या मुझे ऐसा करने के लिए क्यों कहा गया. मुझे नहीं लगता कि बहादुरी की इससे बड़ी कोई मिसाल हो सकती है. खैर, मैं उतने कभी कोई बहादुरी का काम कर नहीं पाया. मेरे परिवार वाले चाहते थे कि मैं फौजी बनूं, पर उतना ज़्यादा कभी मैं अच्छा पढ़ नहीं पाया. नेवी में हुआ था तो मेरे नानके वालों ने सबने कहा एक ही लड़का है, आप नेवी में चला जाएगा तो बिगड़ जाएगा. वो नेवी वालों को थोड़ा ऐसा वो फ्लैम्बॉयंट इमेज उनकी होती है. But then, yes, of course, my family contributed. Many army officers in Air Force, in the field as well. And ever since my professional life that went along, we come from a place. I just heard Kaushik sir mentioning about Abbottabad. So, it took me back in time when, I used to hear the tales from my grandfather that we originally come from Abbottabad. Which I'm told that is the nerve center now of the beautiful part of Kashmir, which we don't have. So and I still remember my grandfather used to tell me those stories of how he had to leave everything there, and then eventually settled down in Calcutta. And my grandfather was in the medical fraternity. He was known as Dr. Albert. He was the guy who got the first US multinational into India, Albert Davidson, that make life-saving drugs. Most of my family was born there in Peshawar, but Abbottabad I still remember very, very vividly. And from the time that I started my professional journey, and it was an honor for me to serve as the group president of Z for a very, very long time. And while I was there, you can't, सारी दुनिया एक तरफ और you can't take away the pain of having to lose your home. It's very difficult, when we lose home for various reasons. We lose home because that place no longer serves the commercial interest. You move for prosperity, you move for many things. We move for a very different reason. And the tragedy here is I know where I am from, but I just can't go and live there. It's very different for us and for everybody else. So this journey that, why did this happen, always took me to Pakistan, which is where I think if we discuss various fault lines, then I've always been fascinated by what happens behind that particular fault line that we all blame, or that is the root cause of everything that essentially happens here. So while I was there, we created a lot of platforms where it was purely professional. There was no, you know how the politics of a private enterprise works. They'll never jeopardize anything that comes in their way. And it has always been a personal ambition that how can I use my professional well-being to serve my country in a way and serve my selfish interest of restoring peace back where I come from. And this also reminds me, General Saab, when I was in 11th standard, and I'd seen, that was a time, just before that was a time of General Ziaul Haq. And I don't know if if anybody here can possibly understand, General Zia's time, I still remember, it was the most wicked time in the valley. I think whatever damages were done, when the state was turning a blind eye, happened when General Ziaul Haq was in his seat. And I guess many people know that General Zia was a devout Deobandi from he. Even have people to do the you will see a mosque that has come up. So back in my professional life, I worked with many organizations to understand what is happening in Pakistan. And I realized that while we love to blame everybody who is connected with Pakistan, there is a lot of sanity in Pakistan. There are many groups who don't believe in that. But the problem is there is so much of social pressure in Pakistan that you have to conform to, as Kaushik Saab mentioned about, various ISI bodies and people, the way the common man is throttled there. And so there is that. You may remember a show called Saregama and Antakshari, and all these shows were. And I started the tradition of inviting Pakistani singers to my shows. I also created the first platform, which was Sharda, which was about the Sharda, the monument that is on the other side of the Pakistan, of the other side of India. For people who perhaps may know very little about it, Sharda was world's first established university that went back. It has a documented history of nearly 6,000 years. Sharda provided the blueprint for all the universities in the world. The 4 gates that we often associate with various universities, and 4 gates with 11 scholars who would conduct your entrance test whether you are capable of entering into Sharda or not. My research work that I did much later, which was part of Sridesh, which documents unbroken history of about 10,000 years, tracing a journey that has been forgotten. So all the kings and the queens that held the thrones in the valley were students of Sharda University, which now is in ruins. So I worked with General Musharraf that time when he had come to India, and just before that we had started a platform for restoration, and he was kind enough to grant 1 crore rupees, Pakistani rupees that time, so that a boundary wall, etc., could be created. But eventually that momentum was lost. I got this good friend of mine, the legendary singer Hassan Jahangir, जिसका गाना वो बहुत फेमस चलता है, हवा 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 खुशबू लुटा दे. हम लोग बहुत उसको कॉपी भी करते हैं, उस बेचारे को पता भी नहीं चलता है कि कौन कौन उसका गाना कॉपी कर लिया उसने. And when I wrote my first book, Refugee Camp, which was forwarded by the Chief of the Army Staff, I reached out to him. I said, you know, it would be nice if you write about this. He said, Ashish, क्या मैंने तुम्हारे साथ कभी कुछ बुरा किया? मैंने कहा नहीं. तुम क्यों ऐसा चाहते हो कि मुझे घर में कोई गोली मार दे? Then I realized, but I left the English version with him, and he called me back. He said, no, Ashish, I believe if we don't support this, then what else? If there is a lot of sanity which is there in Pakistan, but we are so muzzled that we cannot even imagine doing what you guys do in India. And I still remember many people, many of these celebrities who come over from Pakistan to India. Hassan once told me, and you know, I had sent him out to Bombay, and he came back. He got a huge cake for my entire team. He said, "Yeah, you know, I just wanted to say something, and you know, you may judge me, but please don't judge me, and just forget this conversation." I said, "नहीं बताओ क्या हुआ?" यार सब जगह घूमे, लोगों ने इतनी मोहब्बत दी, लोग इतनी इज्जत करते हैं, सब ठीक है, लोग प्यार से बात करते हैं, सब कुछ ठीक है, पर यार आप लोग अपनी लाइफ में इतना बिजी हो, मैंने कभी सुना ही नहीं किसी से कि कोई पाकिस्तान की बुराई करता है. तो मैंने कहा द पॉइंट बीइंग, ही सेड यार हम लोग सुबह उठते हैं ना, सुबह से लेकर शाम तक हमारा एजेंडा तय होता है कि हमको हिंदुस्तान की बुराई तो करनी ही करनी है. आधी चीजें तो हमको पता भी नहीं होता क्या होता है, पर सोशल प्रेशर इतना ज्यादा होता है कि हमको बुराई करनी है, और जो हमारे यहाँ बुरा हो रहा है हमको कहना है कि ये हिंदुस्तान की वजह से हो रहा है. हमको पता भी नहीं होता कि वो बुरा क्या है, क्योंकि हम लोग एक ऐसे सिस्टम का हिस्सा हैं, एक ऐसे देश में रहते हैं जहां रोटी मिल गई तो बहुत बड़ी बात है, लेकिन बहुत लोग देखते हैं हिंदुस्तान की तरफ. आप लोगों की कई सारी पॉलिसीज है जो लोकल लोगों को नहीं वहां पता होती. वी हैव अ प्रेफरेंशियल वीजा रिजीम फॉर पीपल हु नीड मेडिकल अटेंशन और अदरवाइज ऑल्सो. एंड द फनी पार्ट इज व्हेन आई वाज हेडिंग बजाज, हम लोगों का जो इंटरनेशनल बिजनेस का एक बहुत बड़ा हिस्सा पाकिस्तान अफगानिस्तान से आता है, पर वहां वो इसलिए नहीं जा पाता क्योंकि उसका मेड इन इंडिया लेबल लिखा होता है. तो हमको पहले क्या करना पड़ता है, उसमें मेड इन यूएई का लेबल लगाना पड़ता है. सामान वही है, सब कुछ वही है. सो देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ सैनिटी, बट देन आई थिंक बिहाइंड द फॉल्ट लाइन्स, आई थिंक probably what needs to be done is to nurture those ethnic groups. अब बलूचिस्तान हमारे पास एक आइडियल एग्जाम्पल है. इट इज अ नेचुरल एलाई टू अस. इवन मुजफ्फराबाद, आई एम अ पार्ट ऑफ many organizations that do tremendous work, जो हमें करना चाहिए. जो आर्टिफैक्ट्स, जैसे हमने अभी देखा राम मंदिर में कितने सारे आर्टिफैक्ट्स निकल के आए. नाउ वी आर रिकग्नाइजिंग दैट, बट आज हम रिकग्नाइज कर रहे हैं. डज दैट मीन कि वो आज से पहले नहीं था? वो सारी चीजें तो वही थी. Likewise in Muzaffarabad, it is again, it's a very Sharda ka jo the contribution of Sharda to the world. We haven't even started exploring what Sharda actually means to us. World's first Sri Yantra inscription that was written on the roof of Sharda temple, which was later on blown by an Afghan general, which still lies in ruins. The biggest statue of Lord Ganesha that is naturally carved on the face of a rock still lies in Ganesh Ghati, which is in Muzaffarabad, and they call it the Neelam Valley. We call it Krishna Ganga because of that confluence. Has a very interesting story. You know, the story goes when Amrit Manthan had happened. So we all know the story कि देवताओं को अमृत मिला और एक बूंद राहु को मिली, वो राहु और केतु बन गए. बाकी के अमृत का क्या हुआ? So the legend says that the Amrit was then taken and it was established at the confluence of the Neelam Valley and the Krishna Ganga, which is basically the Krishna Ganga river. And then Brahmaji established Sharda there as a seat of learning. And आज भी वहाँ के लोकल लोगों में मान्यता है कि अगर कोई आपकी कोई असाध्य बीमारी, कोई ऐसा रोग है, आप उस दरिया में अगर उस पॉइंट पे नहाएंगे तो वो ठीक हो जाता है. So and because Sharda in itself was a massive educational institution. It was the first, incidentally, it was the first educational institution in the world that gave degrees, diplomas, it would hold convocations, it ran certificate courses, it ran workshops, it gave degrees, it gave diplomas. It was the first institution in the world to do so, and it is safely believed that anybody who knew the practice of Tantra or the practice of spirituality had been a student of Sharda Vidyapith. There is, in fact, a parallel story to this that leads Vatican, that links Vatican, some of the spiritual gurus, which included, even they say, code diaries of a king called Gopaditya has a mention of a man who resembles Jesus Christ, and so are many code diaries in Mathura, which talk of a man who came from there, who had wounds and came at two different places. So there are many such ethnic groups that are across the border, which need to be nourished. Now the problem which they cannot help themselves is their voices need to echo across the system, which they need support. So I think while I have a feeling that we have started providing that support, but I think that's where we can, if ideally, if I were to say, let there be a morning where I can see a split Pakistan, those seeds are already there. They just need to be nourished. That beanstalk has already been there for a very, very long time. Sensibility, even in Kashmir today, it is not that all the Kashmiri Muslims they hate India. No, they're compelled to take that stand. I've been undercover many a times there to cover various things. Stone pelting was one of them. Couple of my editorials that now I can say, they appeared. I did extensive work in understanding how does the business of stone pelting work. The Hindu carried a major article of mine, research paper of mine on the business of stone pelting. So there is a lot of groundwork that needs to be done in terms of amplifying those voices, ensuring that those systems and those people are supported, and everything else I believe will take care of that. With that, thank you very much. I really do not have much value addition to do, and I should not actually, when you have people like Kaushik Saab, Singh Saab, and the Professor Saab that we have here, and all of you here, you are, for the lack of any other word, the kind of work that you do is absolutely great, inspiring. In my personal capacity, whatever I can do, I keep doing. I am sure I don't do enough. But if there is anything that I can ever do, I'm always at the service of Janazab. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashish, for your very insightful, what should I say, your experience living your own narratives based on your own life experiences, and the kind of anecdotes and the stories that you have heard from your fathers and grandfathers, which actually are a great repertoire of primary sources, I must say. As a social scientist, I cannot ignore this kind of sources. And one thing which you have highlighted is that there is, like in every society,